Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Capitalist Cast. Joining me today is Senator Joe Pittman. Senator Pittman, what district? What's your district number again?
Leo, thanks for having me. It's the 41st District, which is all of Indiana and Armstrong County, as well as parts of Butler and Westmoreland counties, Western PA.
And I appreciate. Oh, perfect. I appreciate you coming on today. We wanted to have a chance to talk a little bit more for anybody who tuned in the last time we talked about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And there's been, quite a few developments as it relates to what, actions that the Senate has taken. And also, I would, categorize them as retributive actions that the governor has taken. But before we get into all that, can you explain a little bit what the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, what it is and what it does?
Yeah, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is essentially a multi-state compact that imposes allowances or fees or taxes on the emission of carbon from power plants. So the governor has decided to try to enjoin Pennsylvania into this Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And what's most difficult about it and concerning is that he's trying to do it on his own. He's trying to do it by regulation. He's trying to do it by executive order. And that, to me, is a fundamental problem, because at the end of the day, if he gets his way, by his own admission, it will generate $500 million of revenue. And the reality is that revenue is coming from electric generators that emit carbon. And I assure you that if they pay this tax, they're not paying it. The consumers are paying it. So this is a $500 million tax on electricity consumers in the Commonwealth. And he's trying to do it unilaterally. If you look at the states that are in RGGI, all of them have joined through legislative approval, with the exception of one, and that is New Jersey. And what has happened in New Jersey? They have had a windshield wiper approach to it. Former governor put them in it. Governor Christie took them out of it, and the current governor put them back in it. And so there is no consistent policy on this approach to inter-RGGI at all. And what we're trying to do at a minimum is give the legislature the ability to have the final say on whether or not we enter this program.
Yeah, and it is, as you mentioned, it has pretty wide-ranging economic impacts, because $500 million, it's going to come out of, homeowners, it's going to come out of consumers' pockets. It's also going to come out of the pockets of manufacturers and employers. And at the end of the day, when money comes out of their pocket, it ultimately comes down to the consumers' pockets anyway. So yeah, and I mean, the governor's approach in coming at this strictly from an executive order, regulatory approach, really is, it is disturbing, but unfortunately it's something that we've kind of had to come to expect, because that go it alone approach has really been what has dominated how he's approached things. We had talked last time about, this isn't going to just be an issue for power producers. We're also, we've also heard from, or you had mentioned that organized labor unions, various folks are very concerned about the impacts that that'll have on jobs and job creation in the area. I'm assuming that's still the case.
It is, even more so when you look at what happened in Allegheny County last week with U.S. Steel canceling over $1 billion of investment in their Mon Valley works. That job was going to be driven by private sector trade union labor. And when you look at that, you look at what the administration is trying to do with this carbon tax and driving out the production of electricity in this Commonwealth to other states, it has a detrimental impact on family sustaining jobs that are available here in Pennsylvania. And that's the most mind-numbing part about this to me. We are an exporter of electricity. And so our production of electricity brings wealth into this Commonwealth. And what the governor is doing by trying to enter us into RGGI is making us uncompetitive when it comes to producing electricity. And we're going to simply drive that production to neighboring states, West Virginia and Ohio. So we're going to lose these jobs, family sustaining jobs. We're going to increase the cost of electricity, and we're going to give West Virginia and Ohio economic benefit as a result. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, and it's really, it's born out of a misguided notion that the only way to reduce carbon output is through heavy-handed government regulation. And we've seen just naturally as power plants have transitioned into the natural gas versus coal, Pennsylvania's greenhouse gas emission, the reduction in that has just been, I think it's just been, phenomenal over the last 20 years.
That's exactly right. The technology that we have in the production of natural gas and now the ability to use it to create electricity is much more efficient, it's cheaper, and it has caused older technologies to retire. And a lot of that has been coal-fired power plants. There is no doubt there is a market transition occurring. But if you look at what happened in Texas, you will find that it required all sources of power to be at max capacity to sustain our grid. There are periods of time in the year where we need it all. We need coal, we need natural gas, we need nuclear, we need renewables, we need it all, and we need a resilient grid. And, to your point about the climate, if you really want to save the planet, move to China, move to India. Fix the policies that are broken in the rest of the world. We are the standard bearer. We're reducing our emissions. We're doing it the right way. There's no need to take an anvil to the rest of the marketplace and prematurely close power plants just on our own here in Pennsylvania, because it will have no negligible impact.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a good point. This is really, if you are looking at this from the perspective that carbon dioxide emissions are the thing that people need to be most concerned about. There was just a report that came out, I think it was by 20 or 30 or 2050, something along those lines. China is going to be responsible for more carbon emissions than every other country in the world combined.
That's right.
So, for Governor Wolf and other policymakers really to just take a look at, well, if my state, enacts these policies, and let's ignore the fact that we become economically uncompetitive. If my state enacts these policies, that's going to change the world. And it's really just not. It's not going to have any kind of measurable impact on CO2 outputs just because of the volume of CO2 that's being put out by other producers. So, the RGGI. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right, Leo. And DEP zone modeling shows that of all the carbon emissions that will be, quote, saved here in Pennsylvania, 86% of it will be replaced in West Virginia and Ohio and neighboring states because of our multi-state power grid being interconnected. So we're just shifting the production to another state. And the real irony of all of this RGGI stuff, if you think about it, the only way the revenue comes in is if power plants pay to emit carbon.
Right.
So what do we want? Do we want the money? If we do, then we are going to have to continue to emit carbon. Or do we want carbon to no longer be emitted? And all of this talk about money to fix affected communities is a fallacy. It's a mirage. We can't have it both ways.
Yeah, and it ignores the fact that these power plants that are going to shut down, because they will shut down, are also going to be depriving other portions of the state budget of revenue just based on the economic impact that they have, not only in their communities, but just through the way the power grid system operates, through the collection of corporate income taxes. It's a really short-sighted and narrow-minded approach to try and tackle the issue.
It is. And taking it a step further, Leo, I have school districts that rely on property tax payments from these power plants. And if that goes away, I assure you the state government is going to have to step in and further subsidize their ability to remain open.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this, Reggie's not going to be good for Pennsylvania. The governor wants to enter into it unilaterally, and the Senate recently took action as it relates to trying to bring the governor bring the governor to the negotiating table, because you can't bring him back because he was never at it. So to bring him to the negotiating table for the first time. What has the Senate, what's happened in updating the situation for us?
Well, we in the Senate and really the General Assembly as a whole have been struggling for the last really 2 years with this governor and his unilateral approach, and really continuing to diminish our status as a co-equal branch of government. And that has been enabled by our state Supreme Court. But as we have looked at some of the things that are within our prerogative constitutionally, one is advice and consent on nominations. And in particular, the Public Utility Commission, there are 2 vacancies. There's one current vacancy and another about to occur on the PUC. Now, the PUC's primary objective is to protect consumers, particularly in the realm of utilities. And there are real issues, in my opinion, with the approach the governor is taking to nominating individuals to the PUC. And so we as a caucus have simply said, we are not going to confirm your nominees to the PUC as long as you continue this lateral step forward in entering us into Reggie. And I think that was an important statement for us to make for the institution, because I see our institutional authority being eroded every day, and we have to put a stop to it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The idea that the Senate, through the advise and consent role, but also through other levers that the General Assembly, other levers that the General Assembly has, really it's great. I mean, I applaud the effort to actually use some of that power to try and stymie some very damaging policies. But also to reassert a role within what the General Assembly is supposed to do governmentally. Just to refresh my memory, is the PUC actually involved in the adoption of Reggie, or is that just kind of tangential to it?
It's tangential. The PUC doesn't have a direct role in Reggie, other than invariably they are the entity that approves rate increases for utilities. So
Right.
when power companies have to start paying the bill for Reggie, they're going to be coming to the PUC asking for rate increases. And so to me, this
Gotcha.
is about the consumer and tying this issue with the consumer, which I think has been overlooked.
Yeah, and I mean, as that makes perfect sense. And I had thought, just kind of going back through my memory as to how the governor is using the regulatory bodies. He's using it's one of the DEP boards or something along those lines in order to enact this. But you bring up a great point. These electric companies, the utility companies, are going to be going to the PUC in order to increase their rates. And because ultimately, at the end of the day, you and I and everybody watching this are going to be the one that pays that. So, when you look at what the PUC does, they do get involved in setting electric rates. Just so people have an understanding, how does that work practically?
Well, there's a 5-member commission, and they are appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. It requires a 2/3 vote for any nominee. And so invariably, particularly with divided government, there's an element of give and take. That is the reality of divided government. But the PUC essentially is the adjudicator of regulated utilities, water companies, electric companies, and many other things. And if utilities are going to increase their rates, the PUC has to sign off on those increases. And invariably, there'll be, as I understand it, some discovery and some explanation as to what's really necessary, and perhaps they won't approve the full request. But nevertheless, they're there to try to keep a backstop for the consumer to make sure utilities don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that's that having that oversight role and being able to not just kind of arbitrarily increase rates is certainly a fair thing for the PUC to be involved with. Now, so the Senate said we're not going to move these. We're not going to vote on these nominees, which is perfectly reasonable. What was the governor's response to this?
Well, I found his response kind of interesting. It was the classic junior high, I'll take my toys and go home response. He has now moved to have all of his cabinet nominees that are pending be recalled. He has gone through boards and commissions and in a political manner terminated some of those individuals from serving, even though they have not been replaced. So we've had this bit of a purge, if you will, that I think is particularly unhealthy, and it's not the reaction that I would expect from the leader of the Commonwealth, because what he has done is he has further ground the ability of boards and commissions to a halt, because he has taken nominees and members of boards off those positions, in some cases diminishing them to the point where they don't even have a quorum to function. He has taken his cabinet secretaries, some of which I believe would have been confirmed, and he's basically pulling them back and saying, I'll just let them stay in their acting roles. So I don't know what he thinks he's accomplished. It certainly hasn't caused me to lose any sleep over the decision that we've made. If anything, it has verified the need for us to make it, and we'll see where this goes. But that was his reaction.
Yeah, and so folks understand, when we talk about there being a quorum on these boards, you had mentioned before we started the Banking Commission, which Banking Commission has absolutely nothing to do with the issues that we're talking about with Reggie, but so the Banking Commission, as you explained, it has 5 members as well, right? The governor terminated. And it gets kind of complicated because they're not actually terminated. They were at the end of their term, but they can serve until new people are approved. So he pulled them. He essentially fired those 2 people. If I'm not mistaken, both of them were Republican nominees initially, right?
Well, Leo, they were appointed and confirmed by Governor Corbett. So Governor Wolf had, in this particular case, 2 individuals that were appointed and confirmed. Their terms had long since expired, but he allowed them to continue to be a member of the Banking and Securities Commission. It's a 5-member board, as you pointed out. There was already 1 vacancy. And what a quorum is you have to have a majority of the board to do business.
Right.
So after he fired these 2 individuals, we now have a Banking and Securities Commission with only 2 people on the board, and they can't operate until he nominates new people and we choose to confirm them. So I don't get it. I don't know what he thinks he accomplished by that. If he was so concerned about those positions, why did he let Governor Corbett's nominees sit there for 6.5 years?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's a great point, and this was, do we have a total of how many people he's summarily dismissed like this?
I don't want to quote the number. I think we're in around a dozen, but I need to verify that. But it's been several, and it's been, in a few cases, very impactful in terms of their ability to function.
Yeah, and that's really, the crux of the matter. When we talk about these boards having quorums and being able to meet and actually conduct business, the Banking and Securities Commission is involved in oversight, obviously, of banks and securities.
Right.
But having the members available and having a quorum not only allows them to move on regulations, but do they also have an investigatory role, or what is their role within the banking and security system?
Well, in some cases they do, as I understand it. Yes. I mean, all of these boards and commissions play very important roles for consumer protection, for making sure that people who are licensed are in compliance of that licensure. I mean, they have real and meaningful roles. We don't talk about them a lot. I'm sure most of your viewers for the first time are learning that we even have such commissions, but they are important parts of government and they need to be able to function. And so that to me is a real concern. What will fall through the cracks in the meantime while the governor continues this march on Reggie?
Yeah, I mean, as far as tantrums go, this has been a fairly broad-based one. I mean,
Yes.
I think that the governor, has clearly has taken lessons from some toddlers and how he's approaching this. So when we take a look at what happens next, what happens next, where do we go? I know that we're in the middle of the budget process.
Mhm.
The governor has essentially shut down operations at several boards and commissions. He has pulled all of his nominees. Where do you go from here? How do you address this?
Well, I think in the next 45 days, it will tell the tale. Obviously, we have a budget to deal with. I do not like to think of us not having a budget in place by July 1st. Our economy has been through enough turmoil. People have had enough pain. I think it's very important for us to have a responsible product in place in terms of a budget. But I can't help but think all of this is going to somehow get tied in together. And, I go back to here I am as a state senator elected in the 41st district. And the people that I represent sent me here with a clear mandate in terms of how they believe state government should be run. The governor, understandably, also feels the same way because the citizens of this Commonwealth sent him here. And so we are, if you will, married. And we're going to stay married for the next 18 months. And we have to figure out a way to come to some level of commonality and move Pennsylvania forward. I'm just to the point where I have a hard time trusting anything the governor tries to do. And it makes it very difficult for me as a policymaker to want to sit down and even discuss some of his initiatives because I don't believe that he has our interests in heart either. So this is going to be a very difficult 45 days, and it may be a very difficult 18 months until we get the new election.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like things are getting any better, and I mean we saw further evidence of that just beyond the Reggie and the PUC stuff and how his Department of State worded the ballot questions as it relates to constitutional amendments. They went out of their way to really misconstrue what the constitutional amendments related to executive authority would actually do. And we've really seen just kind of time and again this approach where the governor feels that he knows best. It's unclear who exactly he's talking to make some of the decisions that he makes. And then whenever the General Assembly tries to step in and do something, there is a tantrum of some sort. Legislation is vetoed, and then the governor will take executive action to do what the General Assembly had asked him to do anyway.
That's exactly right, Leo. The fundamental concept of co-equal governance is clearly lost on the executive branch at this point in time. That's why, going back to our prior discussion about the PUC nominees, I think it's even more important for us institutionally to stand up and exercise the authority that we've been granted in the Constitution.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is a perfect place to leave it.
Okay.
I appreciate, you coming on today. I know that you have a 1 o'clock, you guys are going to be going into session at 1 o'clock. I know that At CAP, we'll be keeping a close eye on kind of where things go next. And as this progresses, we'll definitely want to have you on again to try and update us. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the resolution will be easy, and it won't actually be worth focusing a half hour on just how things have gone. So thanks, Senator Pittman, for coming on today. We really appreciate your time.
Leo, thank you. And hope does spring eternal. And I appreciate your advocacy. I appreciate the advocacy of CAP and what they're trying to do to get the word out to the public in an unfiltered way. And that, to me, is more important now than ever. So thank you for what you're doing, and I'll be happy to be back at any time.
And again, our thanks to Senator Pittman. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Capitalist Cast today, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.